William Coonradt,
What,
6 Gary Avenue, Hoosick Falls, New York.
how long have you lived here?
I've lived there since I've been 1 year old.
So you lived there quite a while, because how old are you?
I'm 73. I
73.
was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
I see, and you moved into town at,
Moved into Hoosick Falls when I was just a little over a year old.
I see,
In the same house.
in the same house,
In the
all
same
right?
house.
Now, tell us a little about your life in Hoosick Falls before you went into the service.
Well, growing up, I was one of the Mighty Alligators. That was a team. We used to have a football team, baseball team, basketball team, and it was a bunch of great guys. And Francis Mooney was our coach and everything else, which was Chief Mooney's son. He was the chief of police, Mr. Mooney was. And his son Francis was our coach.
I see.
And we had a great time. And everybody who asked anybody that from Hoosick Falls, most of them my age will know who the Alligators were.
I see, okay, and then, were you in high school and the war broke out, or what?
I was in high school when the war broke out, and I was a senior, and I quit because of the superintendent.
Oh, yeah.
And I left because he was blaming me. I was the youngest guy in high school, and anything that went wrong in school,
He was
he was
chasing you.
blaming me, and I just told my mother I can't take it anymore. I'm going into service. So
And you enlisted.
February 9th, 1944, I enlisted in the Navy.
I see, and then what happened when you enlisted in the Navy? Where'd
Well,
you
we
go?
went to Sampson,
Yeah,
and from Sampson, I was only there 14 days because there was some kind of influenza or something was going around, and they closed Bainbridge and they closed Great Lakes.
I
And
see.
so Sampson was the only naval, Sampson, was the only
Right.
one, so then they moved us to, I come home for 7 days and went back, and they shipped me to Norfolk, Virginia. And a matter of fact, my mother was talking to Mr. Sudan, which I.B. Sudan was the president of the bank. His son Robert was in the Navy. And he told him I was in Norfolk getting ready for a ship. And he looked me up, and because he was, matter of fact, we ended up in the same division. I was on the 414, the Leroy Wilson, and I can't tell you the name of his ship, but he was
yeah,
on
well, what kind of ship was that?
that was a DE, Destroyer Escort. The last thing they call a ship in the Navy.
I see.
And then Bob Sudan was the executive officer of the 418. And he was looking for me, and I'd just been taken under the 414, or maybe, and later on I met Bob Sudan out in the Pacific, and a matter of fact, our gunnery officer relieved him so he could come back to the States.
I see, and what was your duty on the ship?
I was a seaman.
Seaman. All right, and would tell us a little about what happened. You know, you got on this boat in Norfolk?
I got on this boat in Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas.
Brown Shipyard made it, and then from there we went out to Galveston, and we took a shakedown cruise to Bermuda, came into Boston, and then we went out to come back. I got 3-4 days leave, and you come back, and that's all the leave I had after I was in the service. And I went back, and we went through the Panama Canal and up to San Diego, and from San Diego we went to Hawaii. From Hawaii we went down to the South Pacific, got initiated as a shellback, and if you ever want to go through any initiation, that is horrible.
Tell us about it. What,
If they think initiations are something when they get initiated, you want to go through that, because it's an honor, but they really beat the living devil right out of you. They prepared, the guys who were shellbacks were guys that had already been over. We were pollywogs. And they made out of canvas, they made clubs, stuffed them, and put them over the side of the ship, soaked them, dried them, put them over, soaked them again, dried them. Then they made us crawl through a line, and they beat us with salt water hoses on us. And then they made us eat.
what was this for? To
The
get
shellback. This is the Royal Ancient Order of the Deep.
Oh,
And you really, really take an awful beating.
and this was to get on ship and to welcome you. I mean, to bring.
No, when you went across the equator.
Oh, I see. That happened when you went across the
When you
equator.
go across the equator. you
Okay,
become
that's
a shellback.
interesting. I didn't know about that.
And they really beat you up, and they dress themselves all up. They have long wigs on. They have the King Neptune, and they have all these guys sitting in chairs, and you got to bow to them. They prod you with electric forks like devils,
Yeah.
you know, and everything else. And I'm telling you, and then they make you sit down in front of the baby, and they got like little hot dogs in a pan, all covered with mustard in a you know, in a bedpan.
Yeah.
Then you got to eat this.
Yeah.
And then they do it, and then they.
And that happened to every seaman pollywog, as you said,
Yeah.
and that went across the equator.
Even our skipper, even our executive officer, he couldn't wait. He was an Annapolis graduate, and he took it with joy. He went through it.
With the
'cause
rest of
that
them.
was a Navy tradition, and he wanted that.
All right,
know?
after you got over the equator, what happened?
After we got over the equator, well, then we went down, and then we went from different islands, you know. We escorted mostly, well, we might even escorted Wally Devon Donuts, I don't know.
see.
We escorted tankers for a while, we escorted transports, CBE carriers,
And all through the Pacific,
all
wherever
through
they're
the
going.
Pacific, yes. We were in four invasions, and we got hit with a suicide plane in Lingayen Gulf, out in the Philippines.
I see.
And we lost 12 men were killed, and we hit right amidships, and the 4 men that had got burnt right up and everything else. It was a sad thing to see those guys.
Yeah. And so you were in 4 invasions. In other words, you were a destroyer escort in
Yeah,
these invasions.
In these invasions.
And
right.
what invasions were they? I mean, they get you know,
Well,
approximately where?
There was the Lingayen Gulf, which was the Philippines.
Yeah.
And then we were in Okinawa and a few of the small islands coming up through, you know.
All right, and then what happened?
Well, then after we went back and got our ship repaired and everything else, we thought we were coming back to States after we got hit with the suicide plane, but we didn't. And they took our mask off, put it on another ship and kept us there. And then they got another ship come in and put the mask from that ship onto us, and we got hit right in our smokestack, our torpedo tubes, our 20-millimeter guns were all new, and they took their torpedo tubes off and put another quad 40 on, because torpedo tubes was a suicide thing. You had to turn broadside to shoot them, and a lot of our little DEs like us did that, and they got blown right out of the water, because once they turned sideways, they were a big target, you know, for them.
All right, so you did these invasions. You went all on the same ship during your whole service.
Almost, yeah.
How long were you in the service?
I was in the service, I went in February 9th and got out January 29th of 1946. I was in just 10 days short of being in 2 years.
2
And
years.
I was overseas for 18 months.
Out of the 2 years.
Out of the 2
You only
years.
had 6 months state duty, yeah?
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, they sent it right to you. All right, then you got out of the service. And when did you get out?
Well, we were the 4th ship into Tokyo Bay,
I see.
escorting in there, and then we were just off the side when they were signing the treaty on the Missouri.
Oh, so you were in the harbor
We
were
were
they
in
signed it at
Tokyo.
that time?
Yeah.
I see.
We were in there at the time, and then we came back, and then we came back to the States, and I got discharged, and I had enough points to get out early because my mother was sick, and my father had a heart attack and everything else, and that I was dependent, so that gave me enough points so that I could get out, or I'd probably been in the service another 6 to 8 months.
I see. So you came back to Hoosick
So I
Falls.
came back to Hoosick Falls, and I drew the great $20 a week for 20.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I drew about 6 weeks of that, and then they put me to work.
I see.
But then I went to work for Steve Bradley Painting, and I worked for him for about 6 months, and then I went to work for Harold Kincaid Plumbing, Kincaid's Plumbing and Heating, and I worked for them for 10 years, and then I worked in the specialty for 2 years, and then after the specialty had a big layoff, and I went over to Woodflawn and put my name in over there, and then I worked in the Woodflawn, which was now Lydell,
Yes.
and I retired out of there.
I see. And you got married and had kids.
I got married and married a girl by the name of Gladys Monsif, and I had 2 daughters, Debbie and Betty Ann.
I know.
And then I had, of course, I had 3 sisters, and I had a kid brother. And
Did they, are any of them?
the only one left alive is one sister out in California.
Out in
My
California.
2 oldest sisters and my kid brother is passed away.
Passed away. Well, is there anything you want to say about Hoosick Falls or your service before we call it quits?
I think Hoosick Falls is a great place. I'll say this at one time, but I think it's gone down the tubes lately. It doesn't seem as though our politicians are that great anymore. I think they used to look out. They used to have businesses here. Businesses have dropped off, and then you get.
The world's kind of changed too with the big malls.
Yeah, it's
kind of
changed quite a bit.
It changed our society.
It changed it awful.
Well, we thank you very much for your time, and we thank you, and I'm turning it off now.